day. The President's Debt Commission out with some drastic proposals to cut the spiraling deficit, which now stands at more than $1 trillion. And the bipartisan leaders of that commission, former Senator Sampson and former Clinton White House Chief of Staff Erskine Bowles, say there's no doubt what they're suggesting is going to hurt. Among their proposals, gradually raising the retirement age first to 68 by 2050, then to 69 by year 2075. Also reducing the annual cost of living increase for Social Security benefits and adding a 15-cent gas tax hike. Also cutting defense spending, specifically on equipment, research, and overseas troops. Joining us now, David Sampson. He's the former Deputy Secretary of Commerce under President George W. Bush, and Rob Shapiro, former Undersecretary of Commerce for Economic Affairs in the Clinton administration. So welcome to you both. Quite a report to take a look at. David, let's start with you. Is this feasible?
Well, I think this is a very important first step from two serious men in Washington. I think it's an important first step in reining in out-of-control federal spending. I think that the report is a clear recognition that we are on an unsustainable path when it comes to federal spending and the national debt. And I think the American people are ready for a serious discussion. I think that's the message of the 2010 midterm elections, that they expect Congress to go back and start having serious discussions about something that the American people knows is unsustainable.
Well, serious discussions, true, Rob, but we don't want to see a whole bunch of proposals that aren't actually realistic. So, Rob, are these proposals, is it feasible?
Well, it's certainly not feasible in its current form.
What would you change?
Let's recognize that this is not only substantial spending cuts, it's also very substantial tax increases. But I think what the two chairmen were doing is setting a bar, setting a threshold for the other members of the commission to debate. And as various members say, hey, I don't think I can go for that spending cut or that tax increase, then they can say, well, what would you put in its place? They're trying to come up with a very big package, since they know that once it gets to Congress, it'll be whittled down and down and down. But that's the normal process.
Well, let me just stop you there. So I have a question for both of you, as you have both been a part of government. I want to show a couple other things that this commission is recommending. One is about travel. The commission says you got to cut your travel. Big business has to teleconference. The government has to do that now as well. They want to cut off a couple $1 billion off of that travel budget. How about the printing costs? It's estimated that we spend $1.3 billion on printing. And the commission says, why aren't you guys emailing? Why aren't you double-siding some of your printing? Cut off $400 million off of that budget. So the question, Rob, to you first and David to you next, is why hasn't that been done already?
Well, these are the kinds of things that are done normally when we're trying to cut spending or find more money for something else. The printing costs, for example, have been cut back in the past. They want to cut them some more. But let's keep this in perspective. You know, you're talking about a couple $1 billion out of a package that's $4 trillion. So, yes, you need to do these smaller things, but you're only serious if you do the big things in both spending and in revenues.
David, I'm sure some of our viewers are like, we'll take a couple billion if we can shave that off the printing fees.
Well, sure. I mean, every business is making decisions on things like travel and how they can be more efficient in their operations. But I would agree with Rob. It's important to look for those savings. But I think that this offers a real important opportunity to have a rigorous discussion about priorities, about national priorities. And we're never going to get this problem solved unless we have an open, honest discussion about priorities, about the size and the role of government. Rob is exactly right. This report not only talks about spending reductions, but still they're proposing a target spending level of 22%, which is higher than the post-World War II average. It's got a target of 21% of GDP in revenue. That would be the highest revenue level in history. And so we need to have a more fundamental conversation about what are the priorities that we want to focus on.
Well, we look forward to talking more about that the priorities in general in the future, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Rob and David. We appreciate your insights.
Our pleasure.
The Splendor is docking in San Diego. A pretty tricky maneuver because the ship doesn't have its own power. and so they had to nudge it into place with tugboats, etc. You can see the dock lines going out. The